Hi again, YouTube. BearFoodJoe here. Just wanted to give you a final wrap-up video of my first section hike of the Appalachian Trail, tell you a little bit about how my gear performed, talk about the costs, and then of course give you a couple of lessons that I learned that might help you in the future. So from a trip standpoint, I spent about $750 getting to and from the trail. That included a little over $300 for a car rental, a couple of nights in hotels, road food, gas, and of course a shuttle to get me from where I finished in Duncannon back to Harper's Ferry so I could pick up my car. All in all, well worth it for a 10-day trip. Now about my gear, the Lanshan Pro 2 tent, before I left on the trip I had said I was withholding judgment on it because I hadn't had it out in the rain and I had only really set it up in my yard and camped in it twice. So I used the Lanshan 4 of the 7 nights that I was out on the trip. 3 of those nights it rained. The tent did not leak at all. No zipper breakage. My tent stakes worked great. All in all, 2 thumbs up on the tent. It performed incredibly well. My sleeping bag, on the other hand, had a little bit of a disconnect with that. Now, my sleeping bag was very good, high quality. I won't even mention the name of it. The problem I had was that it was a mummy bag. It turns out, and my wife could have told me this before I ever left, I like to move around when I sleep. I like to spread out and roll around in the bed, and a mummy sleeping bag was very constricting. And in fact, I woke up a number of times during the night feeling like I was kind of bundled up. So I've already ordered a new sleeping bag, and got one that now zips all the way open so I could use it as a blanket if I want in case it's warmer out. So my food went according to plan. I took 8 days worth of food, as you know, and I finished in 7 days, and at the end I had exactly 1 day worth of food left, with the exception of snacks, because as it turns out, apparently I have a gummy bear problem. I went through my gummy bears a lot faster than I planned, so I will probably carry extra of those next time. Those sweets are really good at the end of the day when you're low on power trying to get to a shelter. The other issue I encountered was crackers, trying to keep them from getting broken. Now, my fault, when I was hanging my food bag up on a bear pole, I dropped it, maybe twice. So all my crackers were effectively broken, and 3 of my lunches were peanut butter. So as I was squeezing out peanut butter onto broken pieces of cracker, that was a little problematic. The dehydrated meals in general were very good. Now, I've used Mountain House meals in the past, and they've always been perfectly fine. On this trip, I took Alpine Air and Peak Refuel. So the Alpine Air had great flavor, great tastes, but they seemed to be a little bit watery. The couple of times I ended up taking 4 ounces less water when I made those to get them a little thicker consistency. The Peak Refuel foods, on the other hand, those both got 2 thumbs up. They were very hearty, very protein packed and high calorie. My clothing worked out okay. As you know, when I took off, I originally thought that the temperatures would be between 55 and 75. When I got to the trail, the temperatures ended up being 39 degrees overnight with a high of 62 degrees during the day. Now, I had taken a flannel shirt with me. I love my flannel shirts, and I'm happy with those. Had a buff for my neck, and I had a beanie hat as well as a light pair of gloves. That was more than adequate for the temperatures that I experienced. So from that standpoint, although I was cold a lot of times in the morning, by the time I got up and walking with the pack, everything was good to go. I do give 2 thumbs up to my rain poncho. I know there's some people who like rain gear. I had a poncho that actually covered my pack. So in addition to putting a pack cover on, I then had the poncho over the top, made sure I had the sides snapped on it, and it performed fabulously. Cargo pants, I highly recommend the extra pockets on having cargo pants. When I got warmed up and I took my gloves off or my hat off, I could shove them down into my pockets, so it was handy because I didn't have to take my pack off to store any gear. Okay, lessons learned while I was on the trip. So The first thing that I needed to learn was how to deal with my water. I recognized water is probably the most important aspect of the hike, and I wasn't exactly sure how I was going to handle it. As you know, in all my prior videos, I have a clip on a water bottle, and I like to wear my water hanging on my backpack. The problem that I found out as soon as I got to the trail was that my Sawyer water filter that I see a lot of people have on their water bottle puts the filter all the way up here beside my head, which is really intrusive when you're trying to hike. So I had to determine how was I going to get fresh water without having the filter on the bottle. So what I decided to do was I used my Sawyer water filter bags, and whenever I stopped, I would fill these up in the water source, put the filter onto the bladder, and then fill my water bottles. Now I carried 2 water bottles. I carried the one that was on my pack, and I carried one in the side pocket of my pack. So I never put dirty water into either of my water bottles. Now I found that 1.5 of these typically would get me through about a 15-mile day. So I suppose as it gets hotter in the summer, usage will be more. But then I could drain out the bladders and stick them into the backpack and keep them around for later. The second lesson I learned was about my electronics. So I took a cell phone with me. I have my iPhone 12, which is recording this video, and I use Verizon cell phone coverage, and I had coverage between Harpers Ferry and Duncannon, Pennsylvania, about 95% of the time. So that was really good. There was only one day for part of the morning that I actually didn't have cell phone coverage. So that worked very well for me. Now, I purchased and carried a Garmin InReach Explorer Plus with me, and I have tested it and used it. And on its own, it's somewhat difficult to use in terms of typing. It has one of those keyboards where you have to select the letter, select it, go to the next letter, select it, go to the next letter, select it. So most people and Garmin tell you to Bluetooth connect this to your cell phone, and then you can text on your cell phone and it'll connect over to the InReach and send the message. The problem that I had was going 8 straight days without planning to stop anywhere. I needed to be concerned with the amount of battery time that I had on my iPhone. The InReach Explorer has an amazing battery in it. It was only at 85% when I finished after 7 days, but my iPhone had to be recharged several times, and Bluetooth burns battery. So I elected to continue to carry the InReach Explorer, but using this as a backup / emergency and only typing on the keyboard in case I don't have cell phone coverage. So this goes now deeper into my pack. And then using my cell phone, and the way I use my cell phone is in the morning when I get up, assuming I have cell phone coverage, I would check the weather forecast, see what the radar looked like, send out any text messages, make any phone calls, and then put the phone into airplane mode until lunchtime. Repeat the process at lunch, and then again repeat the process at dinner. That enabled me to literally last 2 days off of a single charge on my phone, and made the electronics last much longer. Now, that being said, my battery pack did wear down. I had a 10,000 milliamp hour battery pack, so I have, since I got home, ordered a new 26,000 milliamp hour Anchor brand battery pack. The stove, lesson 3 of 4 is my stove. You know, you have to be careful with the stoves. They make fire. And a lot of the things that we have hiking are nylon, right? So I was very careful when I was cooking in the rain, and very watchful over my stove when I was trying to cook on the edge of my tent. So when you're working with these stoves, you have to be very careful, because these stoves come in bags that are made of nylon. So I've seen a bunch of YouTube videos where people were grabbing their stove using the nylon handle as a pot holder. And in my case, what I did was I folded it in half and used it as a pot holder. But when I went to go pick the stove up, you can see the bag fell below the pot and caught on fire from the stove, because I still had the stove turned on. I'm not sure why they make these things out of flammable materials, but I think my next project is going to be to maybe see if my wife can fix me up with something that is non-flammable so I can use it as a pot holder. Along with that, the fuel within the pot. On the small fuel canister, I got 8 boils of my water. Now, it was 39 degrees. I know a lot of YouTube videos show people getting 10, but I think that is probably because they are doing it more at 70 degrees when it's outside. The final thing that I have, and this is probably a little bit of a tip, is I would only in the future carry the small fuel canisters. I carried one small one and one large one, and what happened was when I ran out of fuel in the small one, which I normally put inside my stove, when I packed my stove without it because the large one didn't fit in, what would happen is as I was hiking, I was getting the noise of the stove moving around within the canister. So again, I would probably buy 3 of the small ones instead of one of the large ones and one of the small ones. The last tip that I have for you is about securing your gear. We spent a lot of time preparing our bags, getting everything in its place, and then a funny thing happened while I was hiking. I got sort of inattentive to where I was putting my gear. So in the morning I had my American Needs Farmer's ball hat, and I had taken it off because it was cold and put my beanie on, but I didn't have a storage spot for that ball hat. So what I did was I stuck it in my belly pack and just had it sort of in between there and my belt. And about an hour later, when I went to go look for it again, it was gone. So making sure that you put your gear away in a place where it's going to stay is really important. I learned that lesson again the very next day because I left camp drinking a cup of coffee and walked with it for about 45 minutes. And when I was done, I put it on a hook on my belt. It was raining. I was wearing my poncho. And when the rain stopped and I took my poncho off, my coffee cup was gone. Later that day, a couple of hikers caught up with me, and lo and behold, they had this cup hanging on the front of their backpack and returned it to me. So I have officially went ahead and put my name on it just in case it should happen to lose again. But the lesson that I learned was when I'm done with my coffee, I need to stop, open up my pack, and put this coffee cup back where it's supposed to be so that I don't have to worry about losing it. I guess that's it for trip 1. I had an absolutely amazing time. As I said before, I needed to go figure out how far I could hike in a day, check my gear out, see how things worked, and test my logistics plan. So everything worked according to plan, maybe with the exception of that sleeping bag that I've had to replace. But otherwise, I think I'm ready to go, start planning for my August trip to do my second section of the Appalachian Trail. So until then, I'm BearFoodJoe. Hope to see you out on the trail.